Jones. I'm really excited to be here. I don't know if I need to tell you anything about me, really. Y'all can Google it or just pretend you don't know, whatever, it's fine. So I'm from Birmingham. This is my first time in Nashville, actually, ever in life, which is really weird. Very strange, but I'm excited to be here and read some poems to you. I'm going to read poems from my new book, Lullaby for the Grieving, which just came out last month. My boyfriend said to show you all my books, so I will. There are 4 of them. I don't know what all is out at the book table, but please buy poets' books. We need support. So I'm going to start with a poem about grief. This book is largely about the loss of my father 4 years ago. This is us on the cover, me as a kid and him as kind of a kid as well. And it was really hard to begin writing this book. I wrote a poem about him, which appeared in my last book, Reparations Now. It was the poem that I read at his funeral, but there was a really long break between that poem and this book, just because it was hard to know how to really put it on the page. And for a long time, I couldn't even look at his picture. It was just too painful. But eventually things started to break open, and the poem that I'll read is one of the first ones that I wrote after that break. And it was during the residency of Converse University's MFA program. I'm technically on the faculty, but since I'm getting my PhD right now, I'm not teaching, because I'm just one person and can only do so many residencies in 1 year. But while I was there, Denise Duhamel, who was my graduate mentor at FIU, was teaching a craft talk on the Pantoum. And something about the form just really spoke to me, and I wrote this poem about my dad's passing in this Pantoum format. If you don't know what a Pantoum is, it's the world's most repetitive form. You'll hear the lines repeating as I'm reading. And although this is a Pantoum, it doesn't look like one. It's a prose block because I like doing weird stuff. But mostly I didn't want there to be white space for me to escape out of, because the experience that I was describing was one that I couldn't escape. Grief Pantoum. They're having a time. Okay, Grief Pantoum. The road home is supposed to bring comfort, but now all I see are the cracks. The blur it all became behind tears on my way to the hospital that April. Now all I see are the cracks. My father staring bleakly at the backyard garden. The loudness of the road on my way to the hospital that April. The faint and final smile on his face, now dead. Mom says my father stared bleakly at the backyard garden some days before he died. I want it to look and smell like heaven, he said. A faint and final smile. His face, now dead, a constant, horrid bell. A frightful palpitation. I want to see heaven. He said, I may not come home when he first took the firehouse job decades ago. All those sirens, a constant, horrid bell. Was he ready for the frightful palpitation, the ache in his chest that was his last and biggest pain? He will never come home. The world is a blur behind tears, an ache in my chest, my biggest pain. The road home brings me no more comfort. Okay, I should say here that I'm not necessarily a silence-loving poet, so you're welcome to make any noise you'd like to make. I always say I love an amen corner or whatever it is you want to do. Thank you, Major Jackson, for that amen. And you don't have to, but sometimes people think you have to be quiet at poetry readings, and that's just not who I am as a person. I like to know you're with me. So this next one, there's several poems in this book that were commissions during my time as Alabama's Poet Laureate. I'm almost done with my 4-year tenure. And then we'll have a wonderful new Poet Laureate, Dr. Jacqueline Trimble, who's a great poet. If you haven't read her work, you're behind. You gotta get on it. But during my time, I was commissioned to do lots of different things. And this poem is one of those commissions. We had the International Peace Conference in Birmingham several years ago, and I wrote a couple of poems for that event. One of them was for an interfaith conversation, which felt very natural for me. Although I was raised Christian in a non-traditional way, and my parents always told me that God is bigger than anything a human can think of or make up or any division that we create. So interfaith just makes sense to me. And so this poem is about how big I think God is and what God has done in the lives of my people. It begins with two epigraphs. The first is from Psalm 121. It says, "My help comes from the Lord." And the other is from my friend, the poet Faisal Muhyiddin, another poet you gotta read. His poem, Allah Castles, God is God is God. When you ask me from where my help comes, the face of God was shown to my people in the dark and vast nighttime sky, in a town just like this one, some 4 centuries ago. It does not matter where in this country you are. My people were there, and they searched for God, who they knew before the sin of those ships. God is God, no matter the continent. The stars are windows to heaven. We can follow them to glory, and so can you. Do you think the face of God is a human face? How can something as big, as world-making, as ocean-building, as mountain-moving, as look how this earth knows to keep spinning, be contained by such inconsequential instruments as skin and bones? God wears many faces, all of them you and all of them me, all of them, all of us, always. A face as singular and as varied as all the spears of grass, making a whole, holy green. It's true, my people saw the face of God, and it looked like the cool river opening up to welcome their feet, to erase their scent as they were hunted by people who maybe were our great-great-great-grandfathers and their sons, by the dogs which did nothing but what they were told. The face of God in the sunlight, warming the backs of ants as they build their hallways made of earth, grain by grain. The face of God in the owl's haunt, in the space between our palms as they meet in prayer. The face of God in our prayers, in the breath on our anxious and grateful lips, in the many names by which we call God, in all the languages made for us to speak. God in truth, unmitigated, painful, and real. God sees us now. What will we show him? So another one of those commissioned poems became an animated musical short film, which was very exciting for me. I was contacted by a production company called Room 608, I think is their name, and they work with PBS. So of course when I got the email, I thought it was fake. It was not fake. And they do a show called The History of White People in America, and the title is provocative on purpose to get people to watch the show. The show tells the story, the history of race and how it was invented to separate us in this country. There are 2 seasons, and I'm in the 2nd season, and the prompt that they gave was for me to write about a Black woman in the South in the 1800s, which of course is the most vague prompt anyone could ever give you. But this was a job that I wanted to complete and receive my payment for, so I figured I would figure out what I would write. So around the time that I got this email, I was visiting the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. If you ever visit Alabama, of course come to Birmingham, because obviously it's the best. But also do go to Montgomery. The Legacy Museum is an incredible space created by Brian Stevenson, an incredible person. And in this museum, you learn the history of incarceration from slavery to now. And I've been several times, and I had been several times at this time that I wrote this poem, but I found something new. It's one of those places where no matter how many times you go, there's something new that's gonna pop out at you. So in the first room, this is not a spoiler, in the first room, it shows you the Middle Passage, basically, getting across the ocean. And there's a little panel about the domestic slave trade, which is something I really had never thought about much before, even though I knew it existed. I think I'd been fixated mostly on the taking from one place across the ocean to another. And so something just kind of started tingling for me as I read the panel, so I went home and just put into Google, not ChatGPT, but into just regular old, plain old Google, Black woman, 1800s domestic slave trade, and up popped the story of Anne Williams, who I'd never heard of before, and so I felt compelled to write her story after reading what happened to her, and you'll hear what happened in the poem. And so I took that poem to the company. They made a beautiful episode, which you can watch on PBS or on YouTube. If you go to my website, that's maybe the easiest way to find it. My website is ashleyjonespoetry.com. Go to the media page and it's there. Or you can go to the PBS streaming app and go to the History of White People in America, season 2, episode 5. That's my episode. And yeah, it was just an incredible experience, not only because I'm a PBS kid, I grew up on PBS, and PBS is so important to education in this country and news in this country. But also just to see how beautifully the animators illustrated this story, to see the Anne Williams figure flying across the world. And it struck me doubly after my dad passed. My mom told us that right before he passed, he had a dream and told her that he dreamed of being a big bird with wings and he could fly everywhere. And after he passed away, maybe a week after, she said she had another dream and he told her that he had his wings. And so seeing this figure in the episode flying, it just all kind of congealed for me. So this poem means a lot to me for many reasons. What a long preface I've just given you. But please do watch the episode. Normally I would show it, but I didn't want to be complicated today. I'm just gonna read the poem. All God's Children Got Wings. It has 2 epigraphs. Again, I love an epigraph. The first is from the song, All God's Children Got Wings, which I was inspired by as well. The lyrics to that song read, I got wings, you got wings, all God's children got wings. When I get to heaven, I'm gonna put on my wings. I'm gonna fly all over God's heaven. Everybody talking about heaven ain't going there. Heaven, heaven, gonna fly all over God's heaven. And then the second epigraph is the quote from Anne Williams, who jumped out of a 3rd-story tavern window to protest being sold away from her children into the Deep South in 1815. And she did survive that fall, and she sued for her freedom, and she won it. She said, they brought me away with 2 of my children and wouldn't let me see my husband. They didn't sell my husband, and I didn't want to go. I was so confused and distracted that I didn't know hardly what I was about, but I didn't want to go, and I jumped out of the window. When I was born, God gave me wings, feathers fit to fly, the wide breadth of the open sky. When I was born, God said, you are, and I was. This place called Maryland can't own my flesh. This place called America can't own my blood. No master over my love or my womb. No master, no man making devil's deals. No mistress holding her skin above mine. No $5 flat enough to sell me. They say I'm going south. They can't take us from Africa anymore, so they'll just take us from here. Can the capital's shadow hide this sin? In the South, the sun is mad just like we are. It burns the whole land to spite the men who make us work it. It reminds us that something in this world can be warm. My children are traded for vulgar currency. And I remember God said, you are made of wings. And then I remember the sky, its gift, those clouds which they cannot hold, and my soul. I remember that God does not know their names. No slave master will see the pearly gates. And the window, it says, you are. It says, I got wings, feathers fit to fly. When I get to heaven, there'll be no bones to break, No families unglued by the spit of Satan. I'm gonna fly all over God's heaven. I'm gonna fly. I should tell you now, when you watch the episode and you hear the beautiful singing happening, that is not me. People have assumed that I'm the one singing because I'm speaking. I'm the one, saying the poem. And it sounds like I could probably sing by the way my voice sounds. It's a lie. I can hold the note from here to there, but that's as far as I can take it. But I just figured I'd burst that bubble in case you're at home like, oh, she can really sing. She really can. So the last poem that I'm gonna read is one that I wrote right before I got commissioned as Poet Laureate. So my commissioning was historic because the Office of the Poet Laureate has existed in Alabama since 1930. I was commissioned in December of 2021. And I was the first person of color and the youngest person to ever serve. So that's 91 years of no diversity, which is very sad, but sadly not very surprising. That's kind of how we do things here. And by here, I don't just mean the South, because people love to get that twisted. But around this time, critical race theory was the big bad wolf that was beginning to form in the national discourse. And in my state of Alabama, our governor had just said, we don't teach CRT, we're never gonna teach CRT. Of course, we hadn't been teaching CRT. I'm getting my PhD right now, and that's where I'm learning critical race theory, because that's where you learn critical race theory, in graduate school. But anyway, at that time I was still teaching at a high school. I was a public high school teacher. Well, it was an art school, but technically we were public still. So we fell under this rule that you couldn't say even the phrase in the classroom. And I was upset about it, but I also was waiting to be commissioned by that same governor. I didn't want to make too many waves. And so I was also doing a lot of national media at this time because, as I mentioned, the appointment was historic. So I was able to go do Good Morning America with the shamed hosts, which was very exciting. The girl did not like me, and I wasn't pushing up on TJ Holmes. He was talking to me. But and I also got to do ABC News Live. And the guy, he's like the backup host, I can't remember his name, but he was going through the questions on the teleprompter before we went live, and I saw there was a question about critical race theory and what the governor said that very day. And I said, hey man, like, I haven't been commissioned yet. Like, please don't go there. Let me at least get commissioned. And he's like, oh, okay. We go live. He asked me the question. And so I had to dance my way around, but I said, I really want to be able to say something without saying something. So I remembered the acrostic form. I mentioned the poet Faisal Muhyiddin earlier, and he and I, when I was editing Poetry Magazine, we had a conversation on the Poetry Magazine podcast about what this form could do. And one of the things he said it could do is hide a secret message. And I said, well, this is quite a secret, so I'm gonna use the acrostic for that. So this poem is called What It Really Is, and it is an acrostic. I call it an American acrostic. And hidden down the left is, of course, critical race theory. And my thought was, maybe someone who thinks that CRT is something that it's not will read this poem and then be surprised by what they learn, instead of coming to the poem with a preconceived notion. So usually I do the sign language letters to indicate which letter I'm on, but I don't have any hands for that, so we're just gonna use your mind's eye to hear these letters. What it really is. Coastline broke into forest, into village. Seas rolled in uninterrupted waves. Somewhere, I insisted on being born. Somewhere, countless tribes called each other by name. Somewhere, a black panther inches ever closer to its prey. Somewhere, the sun is a halo. Cameroon is a whisper in my blood. The Ancestry Kit tells me as it uses DNA to glue me back together. Can it catch long strands of lineage shucked and punched to pulp? Somewhere, a clot rubs its rigid way into my veins. It calls itself America. And the seas were parted with my body over and over. Centuries are cut into the skin stretched across my womb. Will every lifted voice be silenced? When does a theory become a threat? I return to the coastline, village, bright arc, halo of sun. All this has been bloodied, even my body a wound infinitely. Earth spins on an unfair axis. Streets curdle, again blood. Oh, come back, coastline. Come back, unshipped sea. Remember the way my people were robbed of bone and breath? You called it liberty. Thank you.